The sun-scorched afternoon hung heavy over Casa Grande, Arizona, in the summer of 1877 when Daisy Sullivan arrived on the eastbound stagecoach, her life's possessions packed into 2 weathered leather suitcases and a hatbox that had seen better days. Standing in the swirling dust left by the departing coach, she surveyed the frontier town with eyes that held equal measures of hope and trepidation, unaware that her arrival would forever change the rhythm of life in this desert outpost. Daisy's honey-blonde hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, though a few wayward strands escaped to frame a face that bore the soft beauty of her 22 years, yet also the determined set to her jaw that spoke of someone who had weathered life's hardships. She adjusted her simple blue calico dress, chosen specifically for this journey west, and gathered her courage along with her belongings. "Need a hand with those bags, miss?" The voice was deep and startled her from her assessment of the town. She turned to find a man in his mid-30s regarding her with curious blue eyes beneath the wide brim of a dust-coated Stetson. His weathered face was partially concealed by a well-trimmed beard the color of sun-bleached wheat, and he stood with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. "Thank you, but I can manage," she replied, her Eastern accent immediately marking her as an outsider. The stranger nodded respectfully and stepped back. "Suit yourself. Name's Samuel Stone, Deputy Sheriff of Casa Grande. If you're looking for accommodations, Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable boarding house 3 blocks down. Tell her Sam sent you." Daisy nodded her appreciation, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "Daisy Sullivan, I'm much obliged, Deputy Stone." As the deputy tipped his hat and walked away, Daisy hefted her bags and made her way down the town's main street. Casa Grande was larger than she'd expected, with a surprising number of established businesses lining both sides of the wide thoroughfare. The air carried the mingled scents of dust, horses, and cooking food, punctuated by the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer and the tinny notes of a piano from the saloon. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house proved to be a 2-story whitewashed building with a neat front porch, adorned with potted geraniums that somehow thrived despite the Arizona heat. The proprietress was a round-faced widow in her 50s who scrutinized Daisy with shrewd eyes when she appeared on her doorstep. "Deputy Stone sent me," Daisy explained. "I'm in need of a room if you have one available. Sam vouches for you, does he, Mrs.?" Holloway's expression softened marginally. "Well, come in then. I've one room left at the back. $5 a week includes breakfast and supper. No gentlemen callers upstairs, no liquor, and no returning after 10 without prior arrangement. I run a respectable establishment." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Daisy assured her, counting out coins from her carefully guarded purse. "I've come to Casa Grande to teach. The school board wrote that they were in desperate need after their previous schoolteacher left unexpectedly." Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows rose. "You're the new teacher? Well, why didn't you say so? The children have been running wild for nearly a month now. Their parents will be mighty relieved you've finally arrived." Daisy followed the woman up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room furnished with a single bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. A faded quilt covered the bed, and simple muslin curtains framed the window that overlooked the dusty back street. "It's perfect," Daisy said, setting down her bags with relief. "Rest up then. Supper's at 6 sharp." Mrs. Holloway paused at the door. "And mind you, there's a town social tomorrow evening at Thornton's Hall. Good way to meet folks. Most everyone attends." When the door closed behind her landlady, Daisy sank onto the bed and finally allowed the exhaustion of her journey to show on her face. She had traveled over 2,000 miles to escape the whispers and sidelong glances that had followed her in Boston after the scandal. Here, in this remote frontier town, she hoped to build a new life where no one knew her past or the heartbreak she carried. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and bacon drifting up from Mrs. Holloway's kitchen. After a hearty breakfast where Daisy met 2 other boarders, a middle-aged telegraph operator and an elderly seamstress, she set out to find the schoolhouse. Casa Grande's schoolhouse stood at the edge of town. a simple one-room building with a bell tower and a small porch. Daisy used the key provided by Mrs. Holloway to unlock the door and stepped into what would become her domain. Rows of desks faced a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. The place had the musty smell of a room too long closed up, and a fine layer of dust covered everything. She spent the day cleaning and organizing, making lists of supplies she would need, and reviewing the previous teacher's notes. By late afternoon, sweat dampening her collar despite the open windows, she was satisfied with her progress. The school term would begin in a week, giving her time to prepare and to meet her students' families. Returning to the boarding house, she washed away the dust and changed into her second-best dress, a rose-colored cotton with white lace trim at the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Holloway nodded approval when she came downstairs for dinner. Planning to attend the social, I see. Good. The whole town will want to meet our new schoolteacher. Daisy's stomach fluttered with nerves. Will there be dancing? Oh yes, Mrs. Holloway confirmed, ladling stew into bowls. Monthly socials always include dancing. Do you dance, Miss Sullivan? I do, Daisy replied, memories of Boston ballrooms flickering briefly through her mind, though it's been some time. Well, you'll have plenty of partners tomorrow night. Unmarried schoolteachers are rarer than gold nuggets out here. The following evening, Daisy dressed with particular care. Her best dress was a deep green silk that brought out the emerald flecks in her hazel eyes. It was one of the few fine things she'd brought from her previous life, and though it was perhaps more formal than the occasion warranted, she wanted to make a good impression on her new community. Thornton's Hall was a large building near the center of town that served as meeting place, courthouse, and social venue. As Daisy approached, she could hear music and laughter spilling from its open doors into the warm evening air. Lanterns hung from the eaves, casting pools of golden light across the dirt street. She paused at the entrance, gathering her courage, then ascended the steps to where two men were collecting tickets. The older of the two, a portly gentleman with mutton chop whiskers, held out his hand. "Ticket, miss?" Daisy's heart sank. "I'm afraid I wasn't aware tickets were required. I'm the new schoolteacher, Daisy Sullivan. I just arrived yesterday." The men exchanged glances and the younger one shook his head. "Sorry, madam, committee rules, no exceptions." Tickets were sold in advance to cover the cost of the band and refreshments. "But I only just arrived in town," Daisy protested, embarrassment warming her cheeks. "Surely there must be rules are rules," the older man interrupted firmly. "Maybe next month, Miss Sullivan." Humiliation washed over Daisy as she became aware of curious onlookers gathering behind her. She had hoped to make friends, to begin establishing herself in the community. Instead, her first social outing was ending in mortification before it had even begun. "Gentlemen," a familiar deep voice interjected, "Miss Sullivan is new to our town. What kind of welcome are we providing if we turn away our children's teacher at the door?" Deputy Sam Stone appeared at her side, his presence somehow both reassuring and unsettling. He had changed from his working clothes into a clean dark suit that fit his broad shoulders impressively well, though he still wore his gun belt, a reminder of his profession even on a social occasion. "Committee voted on the rules, Sam," the younger doorkeeper said stubbornly. "No exceptions." "Then put her ticket on my account," Sam countered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll settle with the committee later." The men reluctantly stepped aside, and Daisy found herself ushered into the hall on the deputy's arm. The large room was transformed by paper decorations and more lanterns, with chairs and benches lining the walls. At the far end, a small band of local musicians played a lively tune while several couples twirled around the open floor space. "Thank you, Deputy Stone," Daisy said, acutely aware of curious glances directed their way. "That was very kind but unnecessary. I could have simply returned to the boarding house." Sam's blue eyes crinkled at the corners. "And missed the chance to meet your future students and their families." "That wouldn't do at all, Miss Sullivan. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you can dance, and I'd hate to see that talent wasted." Before Daisy could respond, they were surrounded by curious townspeople eager to meet the new schoolteacher. For the next hour, she was introduced to so many people that their names and faces became a blur. There were ranchers and shopkeepers, the town doctor and the banker, and countless mothers who scrutinized her with varying degrees of approval while introducing children who regarded her with open curiosity. Throughout it all, Deputy Stone remained nearby, occasionally supplying a forgotten name or offering a brief explanation of someone's role in the community. His steady presence was comforting in the sea of unfamiliar faces. As the evening progressed, Daisy found herself swept into several dances with the young blacksmith's apprentice, the middle-aged store owner, and even the elderly doctor who moved with surprising agility. The music, the movement, and the genuine warmth of most people's welcome gradually eased the sting of her initial rejection at the door. During a brief respite, as she stood catching her breath near the refreshment table, she noticed Sam watching her from across the room. Their eyes met, and he inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement before being drawn into conversation with a rancher. There was something about his steady gaze that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the exertion of dancing. The band struck up a waltz, and Daisy found herself approached by a well-dressed man in his 40s whom she recognized as Mr. Thornton, the town's most prosperous businessman and owner of the hall. "Miss Sullivan," he said with a practiced smile, "I must apologize for the misunderstanding at the door. Had I known our new schoolteacher would be joining us tonight, I would have personally ensured your entry. May I have this dance by way of apology?" Though his words were courteous, something in his calculating gaze made Daisy uncomfortable. Still, she could hardly refuse one of the town's leading citizens, especially after the earlier incident. "Of course, Mr. Thornton," she replied, allowing him to lead her onto the dance floor. Thornton proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding her smoothly through the waltz with practiced ease. "You dance very well, Miss Sullivan. You must have attended many fine parties back east." "Some," Daisy acknowledged cautiously, wondering how much he knew or suspected about her background. "Boston, wasn't it? A considerable change coming to Casa Grande." "I was ready for a change," she replied evenly, his hand at her waist pressed slightly closer than propriety dictated. "A beautiful young woman like yourself usually has reasons beyond professional advancement to seek such a dramatic change of scenery. Running from something, perhaps, or someone," Daisy stiffened. "I came for the teaching position, Mr. Thornton, nothing more." "Of course," he agreed smoothly, but his knowing smile suggested otherwise. "Casa Grande is a small town, Miss Sullivan. People talk. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves eventually." The music ended before she was forced to respond, and Daisy withdrew her hand from his grasp as quickly as politeness allowed. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Thornton." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The pleasure was mine. I look forward to hearing more about your qualifications as our new teacher." Shaken by the encounter, Daisy made her way to the side of the hall, suddenly longing for the quiet solitude of her room at the boarding house. Thornton's insinuations had struck too close to the truth. If rumors of her past reached Casa Grande, her fresh start would be over before it truly began. "Are you all right?" Sam Stone appeared at her side, his expression concerned. "Thornton say something to upset you?" Daisy composed herself quickly. "Not at all. It's just been a long evening, and I should probably return to Mrs. Holloway's." "It's early yet," Sam observed, studying her face, "but I'd be happy to escort you back if you're tired." "Thank you, but that's not necessary. I wouldn't want to take you away from the festivities." "Truth be told, these socials aren't really to my taste," Sam admitted. "Too many people talking too much about things that don't matter." Despite her unease, Daisy found herself smiling at his candor, a surprising sentiment from the deputy sheriff. "I would think your position requires knowing the town's business." "There's knowing what's necessary for keeping the peace, and then there's gossip," he replied. "I prefer to form my own opinions about people based on their actions, not hearsay." His words eased some of Daisy's anxiety. Perhaps Casa Grande could be the new beginning she sought after all. "In that case, Deputy Stone," she said, "I would welcome your escort if you're certain you don't mind leaving early." Outside, the night had cooled, and the sky was ablaze with stars more than Daisy had ever seen in Boston's lamp-lit nights. The music from the hall faded as they walked, replaced by the subtle symphony of night insects and distant coyote calls. "It's beautiful," Daisy murmured, gazing upward. "Different from back east, I imagine," Sam commented, following her gaze to the star-studded expanse. "Very different. Everything here is." She searched for the right word: bigger, the sky, the land, the silence. They walked in companionable quiet for a moment before Sam spoke again. "Casa Grande grows on you. I came here 5 years ago, planning to stay a month at most. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "What brought you here initially?" Daisy asked. "War," he replied simply. "After 4 years of fighting, I couldn't settle back into city life. Tried St. Louis, then Kansas City. Kept moving west until I found a place that felt right." "You fought for the Union?" "Yes, though sometimes I wonder what difference it made. People are still people, with all their virtues and failings, north or south." His measured perspective surprised her. "That's a generous view, given what the war cost." "Cost me an older brother at Antietam and 3 fingers on a childhood friend's hand at Gettysburg," Sam said quietly. "Hate's a luxury I can't afford, takes too much energy that's better spent elsewhere." They had reached the boarding house, its windows dark except for the single lamp Mrs. Holloway always left burning in the front parlor. Daisy paused at the bottom of the porch steps, reluctant to end their conversation. "Thank you for your kindness tonight, Deputy Stone. I won't forget it." "Sam," he corrected gently. "When I'm not wearing the badge, I'm just Sam." "Then thank you, Sam," she amended with a small smile. "And I'm Daisy, not Miss Sullivan, when I'm not in the schoolhouse." He tipped his hat. "Good night, Daisy. I hope Casa Grande proves to be what you're looking for." As she watched him walk back toward town, his figure gradually dissolving into the darkness, Daisy wondered if perhaps it already had. The week before school began passed in a flurry of activity. Daisy threw herself into preparing the schoolhouse, visiting families with school-aged children, and developing her teaching plans. The work was a welcome distraction from thoughts of both the life she'd left behind and the growing awareness of Sam Stone's presence in town. Their paths crossed frequently in a community Casa Grande size. She would glimpse him making his rounds, stopping to chat with shopkeepers, or helping an elderly resident across the muddy street after a rare summer rain. Once, he brought a shy young boy to the schoolhouse to introduce him to his new teacher, explaining quietly that the child's mother had recently died, and his father, overwhelmed with grief and the responsibilities of their small ranch, had neglected to enroll him. Each interaction revealed a man of integrity, compassion, and quiet strength qualities Daisy had once believed she'd found in another, only to be bitterly disappointed. School began with 22 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. Teaching children of such varied ages and abilities in one room presented challenges Daisy hadn't anticipated, but she adapted quickly, developing a system where older students helped younger ones while she divided her attention among different groups. By the end of the first week, she had gained the respect of most of her pupils and the tentative approval of their parents. Only the Thornton children, 10-year-old twins with their father's calculating eyes, remained deliberately difficult, whispering when her back was turned and subtly undermining her authority. One Friday afternoon, as Daisy was cleaning the blackboard after dismissing her students, she heard the schoolhouse door open. Turning, she found Sam leaning against the doorframe, hat in hand. "Deputy Stone," she acknowledged with a smile. "What brings you to my domain?" "Just checking how our new teacher is settling in," he replied, stepping inside. His eyes took in the organized classroom with evident approval. "Looks like you've tamed the wilderness in here." "Mostly," Daisy agreed, returning the eraser to its place. "Though I'm still working on taming some of my wilder students." "The Thornton twins giving you trouble?" Sam asked perceptively. Daisy sighed. "Is it that obvious? Those two have been challenging every authority figure since they could talk. Their father indulges them, and their mother's been gone since they were small." Sam picked up a small, carved wooden horse from one student's desk, examining it before carefully replacing it. Their behavior reflects on their father, not on you. Thank you for that perspective, Daisy said sincerely. Sometimes it's hard not to take such things personally. Sam nodded. Actually, I came by for another reason. There's going to be an informal gathering tomorrow night, nothing like the town social. Just some folks meeting at Willow Creek for music and dancing under the stars, no tickets required. His last words carried a hint of humor. That sounds lovely, Daisy replied, aware of a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. I thought you might enjoy it, simpler than the town social. Real people, good music. Will you be attending? She asked, then immediately wished she could retract the overly transparent question, the corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. I will. Could escort you there if you'd like, around 7. I'd like that very much. After he left, Daisy found herself moving through the remainder of her tasks with a lightness that had been absent from her steps for many months. Tomorrow night suddenly couldn't come quickly enough. Willow Creek lay a mile outside of town, a surprising oasis in the arid landscape where a natural spring fed a year-round stream. Cottonwoods and the willows that gave the place its name created a green canopy over the water, and in the small clearing beside it, a dozen lanterns had been strung between trees, casting a warm, golden glow over the gathering. Sam arrived promptly at 7 to collect Daisy, driving a weathered but well-maintained buckboard. Their journey to the creek was filled with easy conversation about the town, her students, and his work as deputy. There was a comfortable familiarity between them now, born of nearly a month of brief encounters and growing mutual respect. When they arrived, about 30 people had already gathered. Unlike the formal town social, this was indeed a simpler affair. Women wore everyday dresses, men their clean work clothes. Children darted between adults, playing tag in the fading twilight. A fiddle, guitar, and harmonica provided the music, the players seated on upturned crates beneath a large cottonwood. This is wonderful, Daisy exclaimed as Sam helped her down from the wagon. So much more relaxed than the social at Thornton's Hall. That's because Thornton's not here, Sam replied with a wry smile. His kind doesn't mix with ranch hands and farmers unless there's money to be made or votes to be won. They were welcomed warmly, particularly by parents of Daisy's students who were eager to express their appreciation for her teaching. Sam seemed well-liked by everyone, exchanging easy greetings and good-natured ribbing with the men, respectful nods with the women. As darkness fell completely, more lanterns were lit, and the music picked up pace. Couples began to dance on the packed earth of the clearing, their movements less formal than the structured dances of the town social. Daisy watched, entranced by the genuine joy on the dancers' faces. Care to join them? Sam asked, extending his hand. Daisy hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. I'm not familiar with these dances. Just follow my lead, he said, drawing her into the circle of dancers. It's not so different from your Eastern dances, just with more freedom and less judgment. The music swirled around them as Sam guided her through the steps, his hand warm and steady at her waist. He moved with surprising grace for such a solidly built man, and Daisy found herself laughing as she occasionally stumbled, only to be securely caught and set right again. They danced through several tunes, stopping only when the musicians took a break to wet their whistles. Sam fetched cups of lemonade, and they found a quiet spot at the edge of the clearing to catch their breath. You're a fine dancer, Deputy Stone, Daisy commented, sipping the sweet tart drink. Had a grandmother who insisted all her grandsons learn to dance properly, he explained. Said a man who could dance would never lack for female company. Wise woman, Daisy laughed. Was she right? Can't speak for my brothers, but it hasn't done me much harm, he admitted with a smile that made Daisy's heart skip a beat. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a late-coming wagon. To Daisy's dismay, Edward Thornton himself stepped down, followed by several town businessmen and their wives, all dressed far too formally for the casual gathering. Speak of the devil, Sam murmured, his expression darkening. Thornton doesn't usually attend these gatherings. Wonder what brought him out tonight. The atmosphere subtly shifted with the newcomer's arrival. The easy laughter quieted and people moved to make space, though no one seemed particularly pleased by the interruption. Thornton spotted Daisy and Sam and made his way toward them, a too-wide smile fixed on his face. "Miss Sullivan, what a pleasant surprise, and Deputy Stone, of course, always on duty, aren't you?" "Evening, Thornton," Sam replied evenly. "What brings you to Willow Creek?" "We heard there was quite a gathering, thought we'd join the festivities." His gaze swept dismissively over the simple arrangements, though it seems were somewhat overdressed for the occasion. Daisy felt a flare of indignation at his condescending tone. "I find it perfectly charming." Sometimes the most memorable experiences are the least formal ones. Thornton's eyes narrowed slightly at her defense. "Indeed, speaking of memorable experiences, Miss Sullivan, I've been meaning to inquire about your previous teaching position. Boston, wasn't it?" "At the Pembroke Academy for Young Ladies." Daisy felt the blood drain from her face. No one in Casa Grande should have known that specific detail. She had deliberately omitted the name of the school from her letters of application and interview. "Yes," she managed to reply, forcing steadiness into her voice. "Though that was some time ago now. Curious that you would leave such a prestigious position for our humble schoolhouse," Thornton continued, his tone deceptively casual. "I have business associates in Boston who speak very highly of Pembroke, and of its founder, James Pembroke. A close acquaintance of yours, I understand," the implication was clear. Somehow, Thornton had learned of her connection to James and possibly of the scandal that had followed. Daisy felt her carefully constructed new life threatening to crumble beneath his knowing gaze. Sam shifted slightly, placing himself partially between Daisy and Thornton. "Seems to me Casa Grande is fortunate to have attracted a teacher from such a well-regarded institution, Thornton. Your twins certainly need the discipline of a proper education." Thornton's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened at the mention of his children. "My sons are receiving an excellent education, Deputy, though I do wonder if our new teacher has the moral authority to instill proper values." Before either Sam or Daisy could respond, the musicians struck up again, louder than before, deliberately drowning out the tense conversation. A burly rancher approached, clapping Thornton on the shoulder with more force than necessary. "Thornton, since you've joined us common folk tonight, you must try Martha Wilson's apple pie. Best in the territory." Without waiting for a response, the rancher steered Thornton away toward the food tables, throwing a conspiratorial wink over his shoulder at Sam and Daisy. "That was Jim Wilson," Sam explained quietly. "Good man, doesn't like to see Thornton bullying anyone." Daisy nodded, but the evening's joy had evaporated. "Sam, I should go back to town. I'm suddenly not feeling well." Concern crossed his features. "Of course, I'll take you home right away." The return journey was painfully silent. Daisy stared unseeing at the moonlit landscape, her thoughts churning with fear and regret. She had been naive to think she could escape her past so easily. When they reached the boarding house, Sam helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. "Daisy, whatever Thornton was implying back there, it doesn't matter to me or to most folks here." She looked up at him, wishing she could believe that. "You don't even know what he was referring to." "I don't need to," Sam replied steadily. "I judge people by who they are now, not by mistakes they might have made or lies others might tell about them." His words touched her deeply, but the fear remained. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Sam." "At least before. Thornton won't ruin anything else," he promised, his voice taking on an edge of determination. "Get some rest. Things often look different by daylight." But as Daisy lay sleepless in her narrow bed that night, she feared that the harsh light of day would only make her situation more precarious. If Thornton spread what he knew or thought he knew about her past, how many in Casa Grande would share Sam's generous perspective? And how many would demand the schoolteacher's immediate removal? Sunday morning dawned clear and hot, with the promise of another scorching August day. Daisy dressed for church with particular care, knowing that the weekly service at Casa Grande's small white clapboard building was as much a social event as a religious one. If Thornton had already begun spreading rumors, she would face them with dignity. The church was nearly full when she arrived. She slipped into a back pew, acutely aware of glances directed her way. Whether they carried more curiosity than usual, she couldn't tell. The service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers, Daisy's mind too preoccupied for spiritual contemplation. As the congregation filed out afterward, Daisy braced herself for whispers or cold shoulders. Instead, she was greeted with the same mixture of friendly nods and curious assessment as always. Either Thornton had not yet shared his suspicions, or the good people of Casa Grande cared less about an Eastern scandal than she feared. She was about to start back to the boarding house when Sam appeared at her side. "Morning, Miss Sullivan. Fine service, wasn't it?" "Yes, very." "Uplifting," Daisy replied, though she'd hardly registered the sermon. "Would you care to join me for dinner at Bailey's restaurant?" he asked. "Sunday's the only day they serve chicken and dumplings, and Mrs. Bailey makes the best in the territory." The invitation was unexpected, and Daisy hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose on your Sunday." "It's no imposition," Sam assured her, "unless you'd prefer to eat Mrs. Holloway's cold Sunday supper instead." That brought a smile to Daisy's face. Mrs. Holloway's one concession to the Sabbath was not cooking a hot evening meal. "When you put it that way, chicken and dumplings sound wonderful." Bailey's restaurant occupied the ground floor of a two-story building on the main street, its large front windows offering a view of the town's Sunday afternoon activities. Inside, checkered cloths covered simple wooden tables, and the aroma of home cooking filled the air. They were shown to a table near the back, and Daisy was grateful for the relative privacy it afforded. After they had placed their order, chicken and dumplings being the only option, though they were given a choice of apple or peach cobbler for dessert, Sam leaned forward, his expression serious. "Daisy, about last night. I want you to know that Thornton's been asking questions about you since before you arrived. It's not something you triggered by anything you've done here." Daisy's hands tightened around her water glass. "Why would he take such an interest in me?" "Thornton likes to control things in Casa Grande. New people, especially those in positions of influence, like the schoolteacher, represent an unknown variable in his calculations." Sam's blue eyes held steady on hers. "Plus, he's been widowed for 8 years now and is known to take an interest in attractive newcomers." The idea of Thornton's romantic interest was even more unsettling than his suspicious inquiries. "That's disturbing." "He's harmless enough, just persistent and used to getting his way," Sam assured her. "But I thought you should know." Their food arrived, temporarily halting the conversation. The chicken and dumplings were indeed excellent, tender chunks of meat and light, fluffy dumplings in a rich, herb-flecked broth. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Daisy gathered her courage. "What Thornton was implying about my past. There's some truth to it, though not in the way he suggests." She set down her fork, her appetite suddenly diminished. "I did teach at Pembroke Academy, and I did know James Pembroke quite well. He was my fiancé." Sam's expression remained neutral, encouraging her to continue without judgment. "James founded the school with his inheritance. He was brilliant, charismatic, and I thought honorable." Daisy stared down at her plate, memories washing over her. "We were to be married last Christmas. 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered he had been inappropriate with several of the older students." "Inappropriate?" Sam's voice hardened. "Nothing criminal," Daisy clarified quickly. "But he used his position and charm to engage in flirtations that crossed the boundaries of propriety. When I confronted him, he dismissed my concerns. Said I was being provincial and jealous." "You broke the engagement," Sam surmised. Daisy nodded. "I couldn't marry a man who would abuse the trust of young women in his care, but James was well connected in Boston society. When he claimed I had broken our engagement out of irrational jealousy, people believed him. My reputation was ruined not just socially but professionally. No respectable school in Boston would hire me after that. So you came west," Sam concluded, "for a fresh start." "Yes." And it was working until last night. Daisy finally looked up, meeting Sam's gaze directly. I didn't lie about my qualifications, Sam. I simply omitted certain details that would have prevented me from being hired. You did nothing wrong, Sam stated firmly. You stood up for what was right and paid a price for it. That shows character, not a lack of it. Relief washed over Daisy at his understanding. Thank you, but if Thornton spreads this story, even a distorted version of it, he won't, Sam interrupted. At least, not without consequences. What do you mean? Sam's expression was grimmer than she had ever seen it. Thornton has his own secrets, ones he'd prefer remain buried. I think it's time for a friendly reminder of that fact. Daisy shook her head. I don't want you risking your position on my account. It's not just about you, Sam said quietly. Thornton's been using people's pasts against them for years. It's time someone stood up to him. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as they finished their meal, but Daisy couldn't help wondering what secrets Edward Thornton might be hiding and what Sam intended to do with that knowledge. The following week passed without incident. Daisy threw herself into her teaching, finding genuine joy in her students' progress and the challenges of frontier education. No whispers followed her through town, no parents withdrew their children from her classroom. Even the Thornton twins seemed marginally more cooperative, though whether from their father's instruction or a growing respect for their teacher, Daisy couldn't tell. She saw Sam only in passing a tip of his hat as he rode past the schoolhouse, a brief exchange of greetings when they happened to visit the general store at the same time. Each encounter left her with a lingering warmth and curiosity about what he might have said to Thornton. Friday afternoon, as Daisy was walking home from school, a sudden thunderstorm broke over Casa Grande. She quickened her pace, but was still several blocks from Mrs. Holloway's when the skies opened in earnest. Within moments she was drenched, her hair plastered to her face and her dress clinging uncomfortably. "Miss Sullivan," a voice called from the doorway of the sheriff's office as she hurried past. "Best comin' out of that deluge." Grateful for the shelter, Daisy ducked into the office, finding Sam alone behind a desk stacked with wanted posters and paperwork. He rose immediately, offering a clean towel. "Thank you," she said, attempting to blot some of the water from her face and hair. "It came on so suddenly." "Arizona storms are like that," Sam agreed, moving to stoke the small stove in the corner. "Get you warmed up before you catch your death." As Daisy moved closer to the stove's heat, she became acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance. "I must look a fright." Sam's gaze moved over her with undisguised appreciation. "You look like a woman caught in the rain, nothing frightful about that." His frank assessment sent a rush of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the stove. "Still, Mrs. Holloway will have opinions if I return looking like a drowned rat." "Mrs. Holloway always has opinions," Sam chuckled. "But the rain should let up soon. These summer storms rarely last long." True to his prediction, within 20 minutes the downpour had reduced to a gentle drizzle, then stopped entirely, leaving behind puddles and a fresh, clean scent in the air. "I should get back," Daisy said reluctantly, returning the now damp towel. "Thank you for the rescue." "My pleasure," Sam replied. Then more hesitantly, "Daisy, there's another dance tomorrow night, at Miller's Ranch this time. Would you allow me to escort you?" After the disaster at Willow Creek, Daisy had vowed to avoid such gatherings for a while. But the sincerity in Sam's expression weakened her resolve. "Will Thornton be there?" "No," Sam said with certainty. "The Millers and Thornton have been feuding for 20 years over water rights. He wouldn't set foot on their property if it was the last dry land in a flood." Daisy smiled at that. "Then yes, I'd be delighted to accompany you." The following evening, as Sam drove them out to the Miller Ranch beneath a sky still scattered with clouds from the previous day's storm, Daisy finally asked the question that had been on her mind all week. "Did you speak to Thornton?" "About what he implied at Willow Creek." Sam's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "I did. May I ask what you said to him?" Sam was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I reminded him that 15 years ago, before he came to Casa Grande, he was involved in a banking scandal in Denver." Nothing that could be proven in court, but enough to ruin his carefully cultivated reputation if the details became widely known. Daisy stared at him in surprise. "How do you know this?" "Part of my job is knowing who I'm dealing with," Sam replied simply. "Especially the ones with power and influence. I keep files." "And you used this information to, what, threaten him?" "I prefer to think of it as an exchange of professional courtesies," Sam said with a hint of a smile. "He keeps your past private, I keep his the same." Daisy wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement, but she couldn't deny her relief that Thornton's potential threat had been neutralized. "Thank you, though I hope it doesn't cause problems for you." "Thornton's not foolish enough to make an enemy of the law," Sam assured her. "He'll keep his distance now from both of us." The Miller Ranch was a sprawling property about 3 miles outside of town, and the dance was being held in their large barn, cleaned and decorated for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the straw-strewn floor where couples were already dancing to the lively music of a fiddle and banjo. The atmosphere was even more relaxed than at Willow Creek, with ranchers, cowboys, and farm families mingling easily. Daisy was warmly welcomed, particularly by mothers of her students who were eager to share how much their children enjoyed her teaching. As promised, there was no sign of Thornton or his usual associates. Instead, the gathering consisted of the hard-working people who formed the backbone of the community, people who judged others by their actions rather than their pedigrees or pasts. Sam was clearly at ease among them, exchanging friendly greetings with the men and respectful nods with the women. When he led Daisy onto the dance floor, his hand warm at her waist, she felt herself truly relaxing for the first time in weeks. They danced several lively reels, then a slower waltz that brought them closer together. Daisy was acutely aware of Sam's solid presence, the subtle scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled down at her. "You're a natural at these country dances," he observed as they moved in perfect harmony. "I have an excellent partner," Daisy replied, surprising herself with the flirtatious tone that had crept into her voice. Sam's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Careful, Miss Sullivan, a man might take such praise to heart." "Perhaps that was my intention, Deputy Stone." Their gazes held, and Daisy felt something shift between them, a tacit acknowledgement of the attraction that had been building since their first meeting. The rest of the dance passed in a haze of heightened awareness, every touch, every shared glance charged with new meaning. When the music ended, Sam didn't immediately release her. "Would you like some air?" he asked, his voice pitched low for her ears alone. Daisy nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to form words. Sam led her through the barn doors and out into the night where a full moon silvered the landscape. They walked a short distance from the building, the music fading behind them. "It's beautiful," Daisy murmured, gazing up at the vast, star-scattered sky. "It is," Sam agreed, though when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the heavens. The intensity of his gaze sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "Sam." Before she could continue, the barn doors burst open and a young cowboy rushed out. "Deputy Stone, you're needed inside." Fights broken out between the Carson brothers and some of Miller's hands. Sam's expression immediately shifted to professional concern. "Stay here," he told Daisy. "I'll be back as soon as I can." He followed the cowboy back to the barn, leaving Daisy alone with the moonlight and her tumultuous thoughts. What had she been about to say? That this was moving too quickly? Or that it wasn't moving quickly enough? After her experience with James, she had sworn off romantic entanglements, focusing instead on rebuilding her career and independence. Yet here she was, barely 2 months in Casa Grande, with her heart racing at the mere thought of Samuel Stone's smile. The sound of raised voices from the barn interrupted her reflections. Whatever dispute had erupted seemed to be spilling outside as several men burst through the doors, shoving and shouting at each other. Sam was among them, attempting to separate the combatants with firm commands and physical intervention. One of the men, a burly ranch hand Daisy recognized as one of the Carson brothers, broke free of the group and staggered backward. nearly colliding with her. In his hand was a wicked-looking knife, the blade catching the moonlight as he brandished it wildly. "Carson, drop the knife." Sam's voice cut through the night, authoritative and sharp. The man spun, disoriented and clearly drunk, the knife sweeping in a dangerous arc. Daisy stepped back, but not quickly enough. She felt a sharp sting as the blade sliced through her sleeve and into the flesh of her upper arm. Her gasp of pain caught Carson's attention, his bloodshot eyes widening in horror as he realized what he'd done. "Miss Sullivan." I didn't before he could finish. Sam was there, disarming him with a swift, practiced move and forcing him to the ground. "Someone get Doc Matthews," he shouted, securing Carson's hands behind his back before rushing to Daisy's side. "How bad is it?" he asked, his voice tight with concern as he examined her arm. "Just a cut, I think," Daisy replied, though the spreading warmth of blood soaking her sleeve suggested it might be more serious than she wanted to admit. Sam's face was grim in the moonlight as he removed his neckerchief and wrapped it firmly around her arm. "Hold this in place. Doc will be here soon." Everything happened quickly after that. The town doctor arrived, confirming that while the cut was deep, it had missed anything vital. He stitched the wound right there at the Miller Ranch, in the relative privacy of Mrs. Miller's sewing room, while Daisy bit her lip against the pain and tried not to think about the ruined dress or the fact that Sam had not left her side despite the doctor's suggestions that he wait outside. "You'll have a scar, Miss Sullivan," Doc Matthews informed her as he finished bandaging her arm, "but you're lucky. An inch to the left and he might have hit an artery." The gravity of the situation struck Daisy belatedly, and she felt suddenly light-headed. Sam must have noticed because he was immediately at her side, a supportive arm around her shoulders. "You're all right," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "You're safe now." Doc Matthews packed up his supplies, giving Sam a meaningful look. "She's had a shock. Get her home and make sure she rests. No school for at least 3 days. That arm needs to heal before she's wrangling a classroom of youngsters." After the doctor left, Sam knelt before Daisy, his face level with hers, blue eyes searching her features. "How are you feeling, truthfully?" "Shaken," she admitted, "and a bit foolish for not moving faster." "This wasn't your fault," Sam stated firmly. "Carson was drunk and reckless. He'll be facing charges for this." "Please don't be too harsh with him," Daisy pleaded. "It was an accident." Sam's expression softened at her compassion. "We'll see. For now, let's get you back to town. Mrs. Holloway will be beside herself when she sees that bandage." The journey back to Casa Grande was quiet, Daisy leaning against Sam's solid warmth in the wagon, the shock of the evening's events finally catching up with her. By the time they reached the boarding house, she was struggling to keep her eyes open, exhaustion and the doctor's pain remedy combining to make her drowsy. Sam helped her down from the wagon with exquisite care, his hand lingering at her waist. "Can you make it inside, or shall I carry you?" The offer was tempting, but Daisy shook her head. "I can walk, though you may need to explain to Mrs. Holloway what happened." As predicted, the landlady was horrified by Daisy's injury and the state of her blood-stained dress. After Sam explained the situation, Mrs. Holloway bustled Daisy upstairs, clucking like a mother hen over her wounded boarder. "Deputy Stone says he'll check on you tomorrow," the older woman reported as she helped Daisy change into a nightgown, carefully avoiding the bandaged arm. "That man hasn't taken his eyes off you since you arrived in Casa Grande, you know." "Mrs. Holloway," Daisy protested weakly, though the observation sent a pleasant warmth through her despite her discomfort. "Don't Mrs. Holloway me, young lady. I've been watching people fall in love for 40 years. I know the signs." The landlady's tone was gruff but affectionate as she tucked Daisy into bed. "Now rest that arm. I'll bring up some broth later." Alone in her room, with the pain in her arm throbbing in time with her heartbeat, Daisy found her thoughts returning to Sam's concerned face, the gentle strength of his hands, the way he had not left her side through the ordeal. Mrs. Holloway's words echoed in her mind, watching people fall in love. Was that what was happening? After James's betrayal, Daisy had sworn she would never again be so foolish as to give her heart away easily. Yet here she was, lying in bed with a wounded arm and an equally vulnerable heart, thinking of a blue-eyed deputy sheriff who judged her by her character rather than her past. The following days passed in a haze of rest and recovery. True to his word, Sam checked on her daily, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, wildflowers gathered from the prairie, fresh biscuits from the bakery. Mrs. Holloway made no attempt to hide her approval of these visits, finding convenient reasons to be elsewhere in the house when the deputy called. By Wednesday, Daisy was well enough to return to school, though her arm remained bandaged beneath her long-sleeved dress. Her students were full of questions about her injury, having heard exaggerated accounts of the incident at the Miller Ranch dance. Daisy provided a simplified version that emphasized the accidental nature of the wound without glorifying the knife or the fight. Even the Thornton twins seemed subdued, watching her with a new awareness as she taught with her uninjured arm. At the end of the day, they lingered after the other students had left, fidgeting uncomfortably at her desk. "Miss Sullivan," the elder by 5 minutes finally spoke, "Pa says we're to apologize for our behavior in your classroom." Daisy raised an eyebrow, surprised by this development. "Did your father say why you should apologize?" The boys exchanged glances. "He said it wasn't fitting for Thorntons to show disrespect to a lady who had the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it cost her." The younger twin recited the words carefully, as if they had been memorized. "I see," Daisy replied, intrigued by this apparent change in Edward Thornton's attitude toward her. "Well, I accept your apology, and I hope from now on we can work together more harmoniously." The boys nodded solemnly before dashing out, the brief moment of maturity giving way to the natural exuberance of 10-year-old boys released from school. Daisy was still pondering this unexpected turn of events when Sam appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Heard you were back at your desk today." "How's the arm?" "Healing well," she assured him, unconsciously touching the bandage through her sleeve. "Dr. Matthews says the stitches can come out next week." "Good," Sam said with evident relief. "Carson's asked to see you if you're willing. He's genuinely remorseful about what happened." "Of course I'll see him," Daisy agreed immediately. "It was an accident, and I've been saying as much to anyone who'll listen." Sam's smile held a mixture of admiration and something deeper. "Your capacity for forgiveness is remarkable, Daisy Sullivan." "Not really," she demurred. "It's just life's too short for grudges, especially over honest mistakes." "Speaking of mistakes," Sam said, shifting slightly, "I've been thinking about Saturday night before the incident. We were talking, and I think, that is, it seemed like." Daisy had never seen the confident deputy so uncertain, and she found it endearing. "Yes," Sam took a deep breath. "Daisy, I care for you, more than I expected to, and certainly more than is wise for a man in my position with a past like mine. But these past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness, I find myself thinking of a future I hadn't considered possible before." The sincerity in his blue eyes took Daisy's breath away. "Sam, you don't need to respond now," he interrupted gently. "I know you came to Casa Grande for a fresh start, not a new attachment, and after what happened with your former fiancé, you've every right to be cautious. I just wanted you to know where I stand." Daisy rose from her desk and moved to stand before him. "I was going to say that I care for you too. More than I thought possible after James. You've shown me what a true gentleman looks like, not through grand gestures or pretty words, but through consistency and honor in everyday actions." The hope that dawned in Sam's eyes was like sunrise breaking over the desert. Then, "Would you allow me to court you properly? With Mrs. Holloway's approval, of course," he added with a hint of humor. "I believe Mrs. Holloway gave her approval the first time you brought me flowers," Daisy laughed. "But yes, I would like that very much." Sam's smile was brilliant in the late afternoon light filtering through the schoolhouse windows. He took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and utterly sincere. "Then I'll call on you Sunday after church. Perhaps we could have dinner again at Bailey's." "I'd like that," Daisy agreed, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. As October yielded to November, Daisy found herself settling into a rhythm of life in Casa Grande that included regular Sunday dinners with Sam, occasional rides into the countryside on his days off, and chaperoned visits in Mrs. Holloway's parlor during the increasingly cool evenings. Their courtship progressed with a steady certainty that Daisy found both comforting and exhilarating. The scar on her arm healed, a thin white line that she came to view not as a reminder of danger, but of Sam's unwavering support during her recovery. Her position in the community solidified as parents noted their children's progress under her tutelage, and even Edward Thornton maintained a respectful distance, greeting her politely when their paths crossed, but never again alluding to her past. As Thanksgiving approached, the town began preparations for its annual harvest dance. Unlike the monthly socials, this was a community-wide celebration that would include everyone from the wealthiest ranchers to the humblest farm hands, with each family contributing food and decorations according to their means. It's Casa Grande's biggest event of the year, Mrs. Holloway explained as she and Daisy prepared pumpkin pies in the boarding house kitchen. Even bigger than the 4th of July celebration. Started back in '65 after the war as a way to bring the town together again. "It sounds wonderful," Daisy commented, carefully crimping the edge of a pie crust. "It is," the landlady agreed. "And this year you'll be attending with Deputy Stone, I presume?" Daisy smiled at the not-so-subtle inquiry. "He's asked to escort me, yes." Mrs. Holloway nodded approvingly. "He's a good man, not wealthy like Thornton, but solid, dependable." "I'm not interested in wealth," Daisy assured her. "I've seen firsthand that it's no guarantee of character." The older woman's eyes softened. "No, it isn't. My Thomas wasn't a rich man either, but in 30 years of marriage, he never once gave me cause to doubt his heart or his word. That's worth more than all of Thornton's fancy suits and business interests." "Mrs. Holloway," Daisy began hesitantly, "may I ask you something personal? You may ask." "I may not answer," the landlady replied with characteristic directness. "How did you know? With Thomas, I mean that he was the one." Mrs. Holloway's hands stilled on the rolling pin. "I knew because when I thought about the future, any future, I couldn't imagine it without him in it. Not because I couldn't live without a husband, mind you. I'm proof enough a woman can manage on her own, but because life was simply better with Thomas in it, richer, more complete." Her words resonated deeply with Daisy, who had been having similar thoughts about Sam. Despite her initial determination to focus solely on establishing herself professionally in Casa Grande, she found her vision of the future increasingly included the steady deputy sheriff with the kind blue eyes. The harvest dance was held in the town square, with Thornton's Hall open to provide additional space and shelter if the weather turned. Tables groaned beneath the weight of roasted turkeys, hams, pies, cakes, and all manner of side dishes. A platform had been constructed for the musicians, who played with enthusiastic if not always perfect harmony. Daisy wore her green silk dress, now carefully mended where the knife had torn the sleeve, with a cream-colored shawl against the evening chill. Sam called for her promptly at 6, looking handsome in a clean black suit that, while not new, fit his broad shoulders perfectly. "You look beautiful," he told her sincerely as she descended the boarding house stairs. "And you're very handsome," she returned, enjoying the slight color that rose in his tanned face at the compliment. Mrs. Holloway shooed them out with minimal fuss, reminding them that respectable folk would be returning home by 10. Sam offered Daisy his arm, and they walked the short distance to the town square, already bustling with activity. The evening was everything Mrs. Holloway had promised, a true community celebration where social divisions temporarily dissolved in the shared pleasure of good food, music, and company. Daisy danced not only with Sam but with several of her students' fathers, the elderly doctor, and even one of the Thornton twins, who executed a surprisingly proper reel with only minimal missteps. As the night progressed and lanterns were lit against the darkness, Daisy found herself seated beside Sam at one of the long tables, watching the continued festivities with contentment. "Happy?" he asked, his hand covering hers on the table. "Very," she confirmed with a smile. Casa Grande knows how to celebrate. That it does, Sam agreed. Though I'll admit, I'm finding it hard to focus on the festivities with you sitting beside me in that green dress. The warmth in his eyes sent a pleasant shiver through Daisy. Deputy Stone, are you flirting with me? Stating facts, Miss Sullivan, there's a difference. Their light banter was interrupted by the arrival of Edward Thornton, who approached their table with uncharacteristic hesitation. Miss Sullivan, Deputy, mind if I join you for a moment? Sam's posture stiffened slightly, but he nodded to the empty seat across from them. Of course, Thornton. The businessman sat, smoothing his expensive waistcoat with manicured hands. I wanted to express my appreciation, Miss Sullivan, for the positive influence you've had on my sons. Their behavior has improved remarkably under your guidance. They're bright boys, Daisy replied carefully. They just needed clear boundaries and consistent expectations. Indeed, Thornton agreed, something their father has perhaps been remiss in providing since their mother's passing. He cleared his throat. I also owe you an apology for my inquiries into your past. It was inappropriate and ungentlemanly. Daisy exchanged a quick glance with Sam, whose expression revealed nothing. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I appreciate your candor. Yes, well. Thornton rose, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation despite having initiated it. Enjoy the remainder of the evening. As he walked away, Daisy turned to Sam with raised eyebrows. That was unexpected. Not entirely, Sam replied thoughtfully. Thornton's many things, but he's not a fool. He can see which way the wind's blowing in Casa Grande. You've won over the town, Daisy. Even he can't stand against that tide. The music shifted to a slower, more romantic melody, and Sam stood, extending his hand. Dance with me. Under the stars, with the entire town as witnesses, Daisy moved in perfect harmony with Sam, their bodies close, their steps synchronized as if they'd been dancing together for years rather than months. The world narrowed to just the two of them, cocooned in music and moonlight. Daisy, Sam murmured, his voice low for her ears alone. I know it hasn't been that long since we began courting formally, but I want you to know I have intentions, serious ones. Her heart quickened at his words. What kind of intentions, Deputy Stone? The kind that end with a ring and promises before God and the community, he replied, his blue eyes steady on hers. Not right away. I want to do this properly, give you time to be certain, but I needed you to know that's where my heart is heading. Joy bloomed within Daisy, bright and undeniable. Sam, the music suddenly stopped, replaced by a commotion at the edge of the square. Sam's attention immediately shifted, professional instincts taking over as he scanned for the source of the disturbance. A man on horseback had ridden into the celebration, his mount sweating and wild-eyed from hard riding. Fire, he shouted. The Walker place is burning, they're trapped inside. The festive mood instantly transformed to one of urgent purpose. Men began organizing themselves into firefighting brigades, women gathering blankets and medical supplies. Sam was in the thick of it, issuing clear, calm orders that cut through the growing chaos. Daisy, he called, finding her in the crowd, go with Mrs. Matthews to prepare the doctor's surgery. There may be burn victims. She nodded, immediately moving to join the doctor's wife. As she hurried away, she glanced back to see Sam mounting his horse, preparing to lead the first group to the burning homestead. Be careful, she called, though she wasn't sure he heard her in the commotion. The next hours passed in a blur of activity as the town mobilized to fight the fire and tend to its victims. The Walker family, a young couple with 3 small children, were rescued from the burning farmhouse, suffering from smoke inhalation and minor burns, but alive thanks to the swift response. It was nearly dawn when Sam finally returned to town, his face streaked with soot, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Daisy, who had been helping at the doctor's house, rushed to meet him as he dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. You're all right, she breathed, relief washing over her at the sight of him unharmed. Tired and filthy, but yes, all right, he confirmed with a weary smile. The Walkers, all stable. The children are staying with the Millers for now, and Mr. and Mrs. Walker are resting at the doctor's. The house is a total loss, but the barn and livestock were saved. Sam nodded, then swayed slightly on his feet. Daisy was immediately at his side, supporting him with a strength that belied her slender frame. "You need rest," she said firmly. "When did you last sleep?" "Yesterday morning, I think," he admitted. "Been on duty since then." "Come on," Daisy decided, guiding him toward his small house at the edge of town. "You're going to wash, eat something, and sleep in that order." Too exhausted to argue, Sam allowed her to lead him home. His house was simple but neat, a main room that served as both parlor and kitchen, and a bedroom visible through a partially open door. Daisy efficiently heated water for washing, found bread and cold meat in his small pantry, and set about caring for the man who had spent the night caring for others. As she worked, she was struck by how right it felt to be in his space, tending to his needs. There was an intimacy to it that should have been improper, an unmarried woman in a bachelor's home, yet in the context of the night's emergency and the evident propriety of their actions, it felt perfectly natural. Sam washed away the worst of the soot and ate the simple meal she prepared without protest. As he finished, his eyes were already closing with exhaustion. "Sleep now," Daisy instructed gently. "I'll let Mrs. Holloway know where I am so she won't worry." "Stay," Sam murmured, catching her hand as she turned to leave. I don't mean, just stay until I fall asleep, won't take long." The vulnerability in his request touched her deeply. "Of course." She sat beside him on the edge of his bed, still fully clothed and on top of the covers, his hand holding hers as his breathing gradually slowed and deepened. When she was certain he was asleep, she carefully disengaged her hand and rose. Looking down at his peaceful face, relaxed in slumber with all the cares of his position temporarily set aside, Daisy felt a profound certainty settle over her. Mrs. Holloway had been right, she couldn't imagine her future without this man in it. Not because she couldn't be independent or fulfilled on her own, but because life was simply better with Samuel Stone in it. Richer, more complete. In that moment, Daisy knew she would accept his proposal when it came, whether in a week, a month, or a year. For now, though, she would let him sleep, restore his strength, and continue building the foundation of trust and respect that would sustain their life together. Winter came to Casa Grande with cool nights and mild days, the desert landscape transformed by the changing light rather than by snow. Christmas approached, bringing with it memories of the previous year when Daisy's life had been upended by James Pembroke's betrayal. What a difference a year had made. Instead of preparing for a wedding that would never happen, she was now established in a community that valued her, teaching children who challenged and rewarded her daily, and courted by a man whose integrity and kindness were beyond question. Sam's intentions had become increasingly clear to the town as he escorted Daisy to church each Sunday, joined her for dinner at Bailey's restaurant twice weekly, and spent proper, Mrs. Holloway chaperoned evenings in the boarding house parlor. The town matchmakers, led by Mrs. Bailey herself, watched their courtship with approving eyes and not so subtle hints about suitable wedding dates. On Christmas Eve, after the town's simple but moving church service, Sam invited Daisy to his home for supper. "Mrs. Holloway's given her approval," he assured her. "And we won't be entirely alone. I've invited Doc and Mrs. Matthews to join us." The small house had been transformed with pine boughs and candles, a modest tree in the corner decorated with paper ornaments that Daisy recognized as having been made by her students. The table was set with Sam's everyday dishes supplemented by what were clearly borrowed finer pieces, and delicious aromas emanated from the kitchen. "You've been cooking," Daisy observed with surprise. "Mrs. Matthews helped," Sam admitted, "but the bread is my own work. My mother taught all her sons to make a decent loaf, said no woman should be saddled with a man who couldn't feed himself." "A wise woman," Daisy laughed, touched by this glimpse into his upbringing. The Matthews arrived soon after, bringing a glazed ham and sweet potatoes to complement Sam's roast chicken and vegetables. The evening passed in pleasant conversation and genuine friendship with Dr. Matthews regaling them with tales of frontier medicine that somehow managed to be both horrifying and hilarious. After the meal, as Mrs. Matthews helped Daisy clear the dishes, she gave the younger woman a knowing smile. "Best prepare yourself, dear. That man's been carrying something in his pocket all evening, and I don't think it's a handkerchief." Daisy's hands stilled on the plate she was drying. "You think?" "I know," the doctor's wife confirmed with a wink. Jim's been grinning like the cat that got the canary ever since Sam asked his advice on the matter last week. Heart fluttering, Daisy returned to the main room where Dr. Matthews was recounting a story about delivering twins during a dust storm. Sam's eyes immediately found hers, a mixture of nervousness and hope in their blue depths that confirmed Mrs. Matthews' suspicion. Shortly thereafter, with a conspiratorial glance at his wife, Dr. Matthews announced it was time for them to depart, citing an early house call the following day. The goodbyes seemed to take an eternity to Daisy, who was now hyper-aware of Sam's every movement, the slight bulge in his jacket pocket, the way he couldn't seem to stop glancing at her. Finally, they were alone. Sam moved to the small fireplace, stoking the flames before turning to face her. "Daisy," he began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "I had a whole speech planned, but now that the moment's here, I find myself at a loss for words." "Sam," she encouraged softly, "just speak from your heart." He nodded, squaring his shoulders as if preparing for a difficult task. "When I came to Casa Grande 5 years ago, I was just passing through. I'd been drifting since the war, unable to settle, to find peace. This town gave me purpose again, a place to belong. But it wasn't until you stepped off that stagecoach that I found something more valuable, a reason to build a future, not just maintain a present." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Daisy Sullivan, you are the strongest, kindest, most principled woman I've ever known. You faced scandal and heartbreak in Boston, yet instead of becoming bitter or cynical, you carried your dignity and compassion across a continent to start anew. You've transformed our school, touched the lives of every child in your care, and become essential to this community in just a few short months." Sam released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "But most importantly, you've become essential to me. I love you, Daisy. With every fiber of my being, I love your mind, your heart, your spirit. I want to build a life with you, here in Casa Grande or wherever else life might lead us." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "This was my grandmother's, the same grandmother who insisted all her grandsons learn to dance. She made me promise I would only give it to a woman worthy of it, a woman of character and kindness." Going down on one knee, Sam held the ring up to her. "Daisy Sullivan, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Daisy's vision as joy welled up within her. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Samuel Stone, I will marry you. I love you, and I can imagine no greater happiness than becoming your wife." His face transformed with joy. Sam slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her. Then he was on his feet, gathering her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, breathless and beaming, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked simply. "I'm a patient man, but I find myself suddenly eager to begin our life together." Daisy laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I see no reason for a long engagement. Perhaps after the school term ends in May, that would give us time to prepare properly." "May it is," Sam agreed, sealing the decision with another kiss. The news of their engagement spread through Casa Grande with the speed of a prairie fire. Mrs. Holloway claimed she'd known it was coming since July, Mrs. Matthews since September, and Mrs. Bailey insisted she'd predicted it the first time she'd seen them together at her restaurant. The children in Daisy's classroom were equally excited, bombarding her with questions about whether she would continue teaching, yes, for at least the next year, and whether Deputy Stone would now come to school functions, also yes, whenever his duties permitted. The town embraced their engagement as a community celebration, with offers of assistance for the wedding flowing in from all quarters. Mrs. Wilson volunteered her famous wedding cake. The Miller family offered their newly rebuilt barn as a reception venue. and even Edward Thornton contributed by offering to have his business associates in Denver send proper wedding invitations at his expense. As winter yielded to spring and May approached with increasing speed, Daisy found herself caught up in a whirlwind of preparations while continuing her teaching duties. A letter to her aunt in Boston, the only family member with whom she'd maintained contact after the scandal, resulted in the arrival of a trunk containing her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and only slightly yellowed with age. Mrs. Matthews and Mrs. Holloway helped her alter the gown to fit her slightly taller frame, and the three women spent pleasant evenings sewing by lamplight, sharing stories of their lives and loves. For the first time since leaving Boston, Daisy felt she had not just acquaintances or colleagues, but true friends, women who knew her past and valued her present, who supported her choices and celebrated her happiness. Sam, meanwhile, had begun construction on an addition to his small house, 2 more bedrooms, envisioning the family they hoped to create together. He worked on it during his free hours, assisted by friends from town who turned the project into a community effort. Watching him direct the raising of the new roof beams, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms tanned by the Arizona sun, Daisy felt a surge of pride and anticipation for their shared future. The wedding was set for the 3rd Saturday in May, when the desert would be briefly adorned with spring wildflowers before the summer heat arrived in full force. As the day approached, Daisy found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the privileged but ultimately hollow life she'd led in Boston to the authentic, meaningful existence she'd built in Casa Grande. James Pembroke had sent a letter when news of her engagement somehow reached Boston society circles. It was full of backhanded congratulations and thinly veiled suggestions that she had settled for less than she deserved in choosing a frontier lawman. Daisy read it once, then fed it to the fire in Mrs. Holloway's kitchen stove, watching the paper curl and blacken with a sense of final closure on that chapter of her life. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze tempering the late spring warmth. In Mrs. Holloway's best guest room, transformed into a bridal chamber for the occasion, Daisy sat before the mirror as Mrs. Matthews arranged her honey blonde hair beneath the simple veil that had been her mother's. "You look radiant," the doctor's wife commented, securing the last pin. "Samuel won't know what hit him." Daisy smiled at her reflection, hardly recognizing the glowing woman who looked back at her. The ivory gown, with its high collar and delicate lace overlay, transformed her usual practical appearance into something almost ethereal. "I can scarcely believe this is happening," she admitted. "A year ago I was certain my life was ruined. And now," Mrs. Matthews prompted, adjusting the veil, "now I know it was just beginning," Daisy replied softly. "Everything that happened, even the painful parts, led me here, to Sam, to Casa Grande. I wouldn't change a moment of it." Doc Matthews himself had offered to escort her down the aisle in the absence of her father, and he waited now in the parlor below, uncharacteristically formal in his best suit. When Daisy descended the stairs, a hush fell over the small gathering of women who had helped her prepare. "My dear," the elderly doctor said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are a vision. If I were 40 years younger, Stone would have competition." Laughter broke the reverential silence, and with final adjustments to her veil and bouquet of desert wildflowers, Daisy took the doctor's arm and stepped out into the May sunshine. The town's small church was filled beyond capacity, with extra chairs brought in and still some guests standing at the back. As the organist began the wedding march somewhat unevenly, as the instrument had seen better days, all heads turned to watch Daisy's entrance. But Daisy saw only Sam, waiting for her at the altar. His blue eyes widened at the sight of her, and the love that shone in them made her heart soar. He had never looked more handsome than he did in that moment, clean-shaven in his new black suit, his wheat-colored hair neatly combed, his expression one of wonder and profound joy. Their vows were simple and heartfelt, spoken in steady voices that carried clearly through the hushed church. When Sam placed the simple gold band beside his grandmother's engagement ring on Daisy's finger, his hands were sure and strong, just as they had been the first time he'd helped her from the stagecoach nearly a year before. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Sam's kiss was tender yet filled with promise, a perfect beginning to their married life. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Samuel Stone, applause erupted, led by Daisy's students who had been granted special permission to attend their teacher's wedding. The reception at the Miller Ranch was a true community celebration. Tables groaned beneath the weight of contributed dishes. Mrs. Wilson's three-tiered wedding cake held place of honor in the center, and the same local musicians who had played at various dances throughout Daisy and Sam's courtship provided lively tunes for dancing. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the gathering, Sam led Daisy away from the festivities to a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree. "Happy, Mrs. Stone?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," Sam replied honestly. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this has all been a dream, that you never stepped off that stagecoach, never gave me a chance to win your heart." "It's very real," Daisy promised, reaching up to touch his face. "And it's just beginning." As they stood together in the fading light, Daisy reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first meeting on Casa Grande's dusty Main Street, to the night at Willow Creek when Thornton had threatened her fresh start, to the dance at Miller's Ranch where a drunken cowboy's knife had left its mark on her arm and brought Sam's feelings into sharp focus. But most of all, she remembered that first town social, when she had been turned away at the door for lack of a ticket, and Sam had intervened, not just to secure her entry, but to begin weaving her into the fabric of the community that was now her home. Later that night, as they were leaving the celebration to begin their married life in the house Sam had so carefully expanded for their future, a full moon rose over the desert, bathing the landscape in silver light. Sam paused beside their wagon, gazing up at the luminous sky. "Do you remember the night of your first town social?" he asked suddenly. "When those fools almost turned you away at the door, how could I forget?" Daisy replied. "You rescued me from complete humiliation." Sam shook his head. "I've been thinking about that night. If they hadn't been so rigid about their rules, we might never have had that first dance, that first real conversation. Their rejection gave me an opportunity I might otherwise have missed." He took her hands in his face earnest in the moonlight. "I never thanked those doorkeepers, but perhaps I should have. Their small-mindedness led to the greatest blessing of my life." Daisy smiled up at her husband, struck by the truth of his observation. "Everything happens for a reason, it seems." "Indeed it does," Sam agreed, drawing her close. "And now, Mrs. Stone, would you care to dance with me? Right here under this Arizona moon." "There's no music," Daisy pointed out with a laugh. Sam's smile was tender as he began to hum a familiar waltz. "We'll make our own." And so, on their wedding night, Samuel and Daisy Stone danced beneath the desert moon, their steps as perfectly matched as their hearts, the vast Arizona sky bearing witness to the beginning of their life together. From rejection to acceptance, from strangers to beloved companions, they had found in each other not just love, but home, a place of belonging that transcended physical location, rooted instead in the certainty that wherever life took them, they would face it together with courage, integrity, and abiding love.